Andy, how do you like the book?
It's like reading my childhood, so of course I like
How does it feel to read about yourself as a child?
it. Often it's the stories I know. Of course, there's the parts that get wrong, so I get to snicker at those. It's interesting to have friends read the book and then randomly ask me some obscure question from my childhood that's unrelated to any conversation I've ever had with them. So,
Okay. Are there things that you read in the book that you have no memory that ever happened?
I don't think anything that I don't remember happening. There's some things that I remember happening differently, but basically it's the right idea. I think I'm probably more aware of how audacious it was to do it. Because when I was a child, it's just what you do when you're 10. Of course you go live on a boat. And now as I've passed through the ages my parents were at the time,
Yeah.
I'm much more aware of what an absurd thing they chose to do.
Yeah. So when you were doing it, you didn't feel like it was anything unusual.
No. I mean, I knew it wasn't normal, but it wasn't. I'd never been 10 before, so this is what 10 is.
Right.
Everything's new when you're that young.
If you had kids, would you think of doing something like that with them?
I would hope I would. Still glad you did it.
Oh yeah, I wish we had done more. I never did get over it. We didn't get into the Pacific. Really live on the boat for a long time till you became real boat kids.
Are you sorry you didn't keep going after that first year?
I am, but I don't know about Andy and Jake and Pam. Well, I know about Pam and Jake. Not so sure about Andy.
I would have done anything.
Yeah.
I was just going with it. That's what being 10 is. I hadn't been 11 yet, so I didn't know what it was supposed to be.
So when Jake came on the boat, it was okay with you? Were you happy to see him? Or
Yeah.
did you like being an only child on the boat?
I think I liked getting a chance at being an only child. Jake got 4 years of being an only child, but of course he was an infant for a good portion of that. So I probably won out with my 6 months or whatever it was of being an only child. But
Okay.
I liked having him along as well.
Okay. Did you meet other kids on the boat when you were on the boat?
Really only twice. There were two other. Herta, when we met them, they had a daughter, younger than me, but she had grown up on the boat, so she knew a lot more about boating. And then there was another family, I want to say, in Puerto Rico that we met. That lived on the boat. Don't know if they made it in the book or not, but they were a long-term family living on the boat with several kids.
Huh.
In fact, the kids had been taken over the aft cabin, and I don't think that the parents said something like they hadn't been down there into the aft cabin in years.
Okay.
Yeah, the mother didn't fit down. She was pregnant when they bought the boat, and so she didn't see that.
Okay.
And then let the kids down. She had never been in the aft cabin.
I don't think you have that story in the book.
No.
No. Yeah, I was on the boat when we nearly got swept out to sea.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then when you walked to the gas station.
Yeah, that's the one we're not sure of. I
Okay.
think he came with me. Andy thinks he stayed with the dinghy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, with the big boat, by the side of the big boat?
Yeah.
And, was there anything that stands out as, wow, that was impressive, or, exciting, or scary, or interesting, or beautiful, or whatever? That's something that you think about.
Well, they all make good stories to tell. Like having climbed the large pyramid at Chichen Itza as a 10-year-old, getting to climb pyramids as a 10-year-old is a fun experience. swimming in crystal clear waters in Ile de Fouche, where the water's so clear the boat is floating in air, looks like it's floating in air.
Yeah. Were you ever scared, like when you were out in the ocean?
No, I don't think I was ever scared. Of course, I was with my parents, and your parents make everything turn out okay. So
You trusted that your dad knew what he was doing?
I trusted it would turn out. I don't know if I trusted that he knew what he was doing, but that we would figure things out.
Okay.
I think we're a family that figures things out. You don't have to know the answer to start the question.
Of what Andy thinks of it all, I do think maybe if he hadn't gone on the boat, would you have taken off on your own and traveled the world with a backpack?
I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. You know, we also lived in China and those other things. So
Yeah.
China certainly taught me I could travel in places I don't have to speak the language and know everything to get by.
Yeah.
Although living on the boat was probably the first lesson in that, knowing that you can go to a market that's totally foreign to you and you don't even recognize the food and still figure out how to get through. China taught me that I don't need to even actually be able to share the language with the people but yeah, it certainly changed how I perceived the world as a 10-year-old. Rather than just seeing my hometown as being the center of the world, I saw that no, my hometown is part of the world, but it is certainly not the center. And that there are lots of options and ways that life could go through and do things. I even dreamed of backpacking back then. I remember daydreaming of living out of a backpack and seeing the backpackers that traveled with us, like Jeremy and Gary, especially Gary. Not that I saw him much, but getting to see those folks and how they lived, certainly gave me a model of what was possible out there.
Mm.
Both Kent and I have talked about the similarities between like walking a Camino with your backpack and being on a sailboat. You know, you're passing through, you're not really part of where you'd be traveling, but in a way you're much more part of it than if you were just a regular tourist. You become part of the landscape of where you are, and also just, you know, you're living very minimally. I mean, you don't have much with you, and you're living really simply.
Yeah.
And you're facing unknown stuff constantly. You know, every day can be different. You know, you never know what it's going to be like when you come into the next port or harbor.
Yeah, no one's managing it for you to make it perfect,
Yeah.
like you might on a trip.
Yeah.
That was always a discussion we had as amongst backpackers when we were traveling, because we interacted with the tourists who were staying in fancy hotels and traveling via tour transit, and the backpackers were in the back of the pickups with the locals and the bags of rice and helping unload carrying the bags of rice into the old lady's house when we stopped and those things.
Right.
But so we always liked to think that we were more of the community and less isolated, which I think is true to an extent, but the gulf between us and the community is still much greater. That we're still, most of the especially longer term travelers went, yes, I'd like that, and I think I'm closer than a tourist, but deep in the reality of it, we are much more like the tourist walking through this town than any of the locals.
Right.
Sometimes you would find the Peace Corps volunteers, they were nice to meet because they connected to their communities at a level we never got to connect with as backpackers. But we were still definitely part of a tourist industry and sort of the cultural erosion that happens as people flow through your community.
This is both when you were on the boat and when you were backpacking?
I think of that mostly for backpacking.
Okay.
The boating, I would put as much more in the tourist. We were still shopping at markets, and especially as a family, I think we had an opportunity to interact in a way that
Right.
was more genuine, but we still ultimately were visitors, and ultimately visitors with a very different point of view in the community and situation, just by the fact that we were unrooted and they were rooted very much in that place. And that there makes us sort of a tumbleweed versus the plant that's growing there, which I think is a really big difference between there's less barriers because you're not paying someone to take care of everything for you, like as a tourist, but you're still ultimately a tourist.
Do you think, traveling like you did on a sailboat or traveling as a backpacker changed your view of the world or the way you see yourself in the world?
Oh, very much. I mean, I saw firsthand people who were starving and very impoverished. I saw people who were very rich and had, the helicopter on the back of their boat that they didn't actually live on. And I saw the interactions between of how people treat each other, and just that the world really is a place bigger than Brookings, South Dakota.
Yeah.
I mean, I was happy to grow up in Brookings, but I was also happy to see that there was really a complete world that did not involve that.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any distinct memories of that trip in Haiti with the horses up into the mountains where you really saw lots of starving people and people were very poor?
So much of that stay in Haiti, even outside of that trip. I mean, the horse trip was partly it's being on horses, and the sort of the devastation to the landscape was very apparent. But even in the community and being in the harbor was very, we were very out of place, and people were poor, and yet things are still going on. But there was a very much an opening of what a place can be.
Okay. Were there a lot of other boaters there from other places, or there were not very many? Or none?
I don't remember them.
There weren't any others.
There weren't any others. So you were kind of off the beaten track, because most people wouldn't go to Haiti because it's got such a bad reputation, and But there were rich people in tourist hotels there, right?
Not that I saw. I know there are now. I have a friend who's been to Haiti on a cruise ship and only seen Haiti through the enclave of the cruise ship beach. And so his impression of Haiti is very different than my impression of Haiti.
Yeah.
Which is also separated by 20 years in time.
Right.
But also is just separated by that fence that the locals dare not cross.
Yeah, well, I read about, you can go to Jamaica, say, and stay in a fancy resort on the beach, and it's or even in the Virgin Islands. I mean, it's totally different than what the local people live, how they live. I always find it really troubling in a way.
I mean, I would say the U.S. is not all that far off from that. You drive around any city and you have people who are living in very poor conditions, and you also have people who have endless spare rooms in swimming pools they never swim in, and
3 cars in the garage.
Yeah.